Okay. You're all very welcome. This is our third Careers with Classics event. My name is Cosetta Cadau. Hello. I work in the Department of Ancient Classics, and I am here with a couple of my colleagues, Dr. Carl O'Brien, and I think some are connected online. The Department of Ancient Classics is located in this building in the Arts Block, and we are organizing this fantastic event, which for the first time in 3 years welcomes contingents of students from various parts of Ireland. So we are delighted to have you all here. It's the third year in a row, as I said, that we are happy to welcome teams remotely and in person to the Maynooth University campus. And I'm really delighted to see such a great response, particularly this year, to this initiative that we plan to continue over the years. So we plan this to become a yearly event and to connect and to kind of fill the gap between secondary school students and the third year institution, so that students are not meeting and visiting the campus for the first time during the open day only, but they are more aware of what choices are available and what possibilities and opportunities a degree in classics can offer to them. This event is also designed to showcase how classics, fits into the ever-changing professional landscape of Ireland, but also of Europe. And in other words, it's a degree that equips you with key skills that are transferable in any field of a wide range of professions, and shapes you as a prospective candidate who will stand out because of these particular skills. I'm not going to say much about what classics is, because you all know what the subject entails, and I'm just going to start saying a couple of words about our speakers and the schedule of today's event. We have 2 hours packed with information and inspiring stories of classics graduate. Today's event is an occasion. Provides a much-needed opportunity to discuss the future of classics graduates and to explore the diverse range of professional contexts in which they work. We are proud to welcome to the department 5 classics graduates. We have 3 from our own department here at Maynooth University and 2 who have studied elsewhere, so international candidates, and they have found success in a variety of exciting careers, the education sector, but also project management, academic policy and administration, finance and professional services. Rebecca McLean, Rebecca Dunwoody, Emma Doran, Liam Berade, and Giacomo Peru, who is talking to us from Edinburgh. They have kindly agreed to talk to us about their work and the paths that they've taken since leaving classics, and help us understand how to best market their skills. This event aims to be interactive as much as possible, and I know that some of you will have to leave early, but feel free, please, to type your questions in the chat if you're online, or to raise your hand in the room, and we will address them as we go. So the big question is, what can a degree in classics do for you? That's the big question. Where do the classics graduates work? The Careers and Employability Service here at Maynooth offers support throughout your third level studies and the entire job application process. They offer, for example, help writing your CV, they have a CV review tool, interview practice, etc. And the first speaker that I would like to introduce today is Enan Strain, Careers Advisor here at Maynooth University, who will talk to us about what you can expect after you graduate in classics. Enan? I'm just sharing the slides, so you should be able to see Enan's slides now.
Thanks. That's great. Thank you very much, and welcome to you all. Thanks for coming out. As Cosetta said, my name's Enan. I'm a careers advisor. There are 3 of us in the university here. So what we do is we try and help people figure out what they'd like to do when they're here, what they'd like to do as they move through the place and what they'd like to do maybe after they leave. We do like to see people progress and do something that they want. So the office is here just to give you a hand with that. It's different for everybody, and I know it's probably a little different to the structure of career guidance in secondary schools. This is quite casual. People come into us and have meetings pretty regularly, as many as you want actually, all the way through, about any aspect of how confused or certain you are about what you'd like to do. So I have some information for you today. This is basically a review of what works for people as they come into us. We have thousands of interactions, one-on-one career sessions with people every year, so you start to learn a few things about what works for people. So I thought I'd show you some of that and where people go afterwards. So I don't have much to read, it's only a page, not much. So the first thing I might mention is that when faced with a question that we're trying to solve, sometimes it is tempting to look for a solution to be handed to us. Yes, definitely, that is great sometimes. Other times, it's not so much. Regarding career, questions like what should I do, where should I go, what course might I choose, whether I should go to university or not, what subject might I do there or subjects, why would that be good, and so on. For me, it can be tempting to think, well, I need to be told. And yes, sometimes that works, but I know from chatting to people, it isn't really all that normal to be told exactly what to do. So we can help with that actually here. My experience with most people is that we begin to question a bit of advice given to us if it's not explained well. There needs to be a tagline or a bit of a description saying, here's why it might suit you, here's why it might work. And if it's there, that's great, but usually I find that advice or direction doesn't really come with such explanation, so it kind of doesn't really work. Realistically, in university, you've got a place here that helps you figure this stuff out yourself. It's a bit more work, but you're not alone with it. We help you with that. The best kind of learning, I think, in my experience, is learning through experience itself, like trying stuff yourself. Trying things, feeling things, experiencing stuff, going through it yourself. Not necessarily alone, but just trying things, I mean. Experiencing something lets you develop your own understanding of what's best for you. That's better than getting direction from somebody else, usually in the long run. You can't really try everything, and I know that. Like, there's no way you could go out and try every job and figure out which one you like best, or go to every university and every course. Sure, not going to happen. You can't do that. But there are some things you can look for, and maybe this is what relates to you now, perhaps. Experiences that help you succeed in any situation are ideal. Let me just explain that. Some things that you learn are transferable, meaning that what you learn in one situation can be used successfully in another situation. They're transferable. So if you're equipped with transferable skills, you can succeed in nearly any situation, and that's valuable. That's very good. We can't study every course in the world, I understand, or do every job in the world. In order to determine what's best for us, we look for courses that help us or give us the chance to develop transferable skills. Maybe that's something you could keep in your back pocket just as a card to play if you're looking at a decision shortly. Studying for a degree is useful in this regard. I'll leave that for a second. The employers recognise this. In particular, I'll just mention three, I'll not go through much of it. Critical thinking skills are massive with employers. Advanced communication skills and strong interpersonal skills, so dealing with other people, among others, of course, but those are three massive ones. Doing a degree gives you time to work on those. It also gives you time to think. Not everybody really knows what they want to do, and believe me, from talking to people, people are less sure about what they want to do than they are publicly willing to admit, even among friends, which is totally fine, very normal. Vast majority actually aren't that sure. So doing a degree gives you time to play with things, try things, think about things. You get time to develop a way of thinking that helps you understand yourself and the world and how you fit. And maybe depending on what you pick, figure out what other people are like, how they behave, why they behave like that, and what they want. That's a skill set that's really valuable for later on in perhaps job or even just life. So there's value in that. In particular, a degree that helps you develop those transferable skills. So it's a skill set that maybe you might look for if you're making a choice to go to university and to pick subjects. So somebody who's skilled in critical thinking, who's able to purposefully communicate what they want, able to skillfully deal with other people, and maybe know a little bit about how the world works and how other people work, that is really, really valuable for you later on. It translates into good pay, actually, and a bit of purpose in the job that you do later. To just end this point, the most satisfying, maybe the best path for ourselves is one we design by yourself. Maybe not alone, but designed by ourselves for ourselves. So may I suggest that if you are looking for something, look for transferable skills in a degree that you might choose. I know that's a fairly basic one. It's not quite as satisfying if somebody just comes along and points out an answer to you. It doesn't work sometimes, but for the big stuff, really, it's more useful if you can put your own stamp on things. One or two other quick pictures, slides here. I have a survey that I complete in the office every year. We survey in the summer about 3,500 graduates from all the degrees here and all the masters and all the PhDs. This is the most recent survey in. We had about 3,500-ish surveyed this year. So a lot of them are working. You see that blue part of the pie chart? 76%. That's really high employment. A bunch of them there, the orange, about 17% chose to go on to further study because they just want more. Why not? Some figures I picked out of it that I thought might be useful. A lot of people here stay to work in Ireland in the first year or so. Some of them choose to travel later out of choice because they like to. But for the first year, a lot of them choose to stay here. And in around the Dublin-ish area, you can see the second point there. One thing that really stepped out to me, about 31,500 was the average graduate salary last summer, right? Which is not bad. You could do a bit of damage with that. Usually that increases about 500 or 600 quid a year. I've been doing this now I've been watching these figures for about 15 years. But this year it jumped up by 5 grand, which is a lot. And I looked at one of the questions particularly that asked people, now that you're working, what are you earning? There's the top category that people can select in this survey, 80,000 or more. 36 of them said, yeah, I'm in that category. I'd expect to see a lot of them, 14 in that category, saying, oh yeah, I'm from an education background. So that'll be management in schools and management and board of the department, for example. So that'll be normal enough. But 11, which is actually proportionately a lot, 9 months out of college are working came from arts and humanities. 5 in business, 3 in science, 2 in services, and 1 in IT. Like, you'd think IT would be up there. Wow, I was amazed at that. So I thought that's worth mentioning. Some job titles that pop out of the LinkedIn survey I did. This is a slightly different survey. I just went online to LinkedIn. If you're familiar with that, it's a website which shows a profile of somebody, like their CV, where they've studied, where they're working. Some job titles that pop out of the search, if you put in classics and Maynooth University, you click search, you can see people's job titles who have these keywords in their search. Those are, if you can read them, fairly large jobs. They're all over the place. The reason that that is relevant is because they have a huge degree of transferable skills, and they apply their own interest and they pursue these jobs. Some people I can see obviously has taken further study, maybe did a master's in something as well, which is definitely worth thinking about. Let me just do one last point, or 2 quick points. I'm not sure if you're aware, if you choose a degree in university and a subject, say classics, you don't have to go up to the big classics factory and get a job in classics. It doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, it would be handy, but no, it doesn't work like that. You take the skill set that you build up and you pursue further work, looking for work with those skills. And they are very transferable, like I said. Also, again, if you're not so sure, if you don't know, you can do a master's in something totally different afterwards to add to it. a couple of examples there. There was IT people, people in education, people in banking, people in HR, people in management. They've taken a further course in something, so they've added to it. So basically what it means for you is if you choose something now at college, at university, you don't have to stick at that for the rest of your life, which is nice. It gives you options. You can move to something else if you so wish. And let me just say one last thing. If you are thinking Maynooth, if you are thinking classics, be aware that if you're choosing, say, arts as the course to do through which you can study classics, you have a lot of choice. You can mix it with other things, and that's a good thing. So if you are thinking, yeah, maybe take a little risk, something maybe you haven't done so far, something maybe that is similar to what you've done, that's totally fine. You can mix and match a lot. And second year does not punish you for making a bad decision. Even if you choose a course or subject you don't like, after a year you can drop it and you can keep on with the other subjects you take. I think that's my time, Cosetta. I'll finish on that. So hopefully we'll see you in Maynooth some stage soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Rebecca McGlynn, a graduate of Maynooth University. She studied classics and English literature and graduated here at Maynooth in 2011. Rebecca went on to receive her MA in Irish and English literature from New York University in 2013, and then her PhD in English literature from Emory University in 2020. During her time there, she served as a teaching assistant, an undergraduate instructor, and a libraries research fellow. Rebecca is based full-time in the US and is currently working with Bloomsbury, USA as a production editor. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I graduated, as Cosetta said, in 2011. I got my joint honors degree in English and classics. I'm originally from Gorey, actually, in a fun coincidence. I didn't realize there would be a contingent from Gorey here. And I believe Ms. O'Grady was my teacher for classics at the Leaving Cert level. So I'm currently based in Houston, Texas. So I work in publishing. I'm very fortunate. I'm one of those very lucky few that gets to work remotely. So I live in Houston. So today I'm going to very briefly kind of go over, sorry. Wrong ones. There we go. So I'm very briefly going to go over what I did post Maynooth. I'm going to talk a little bit about where I went, the things I did, the places I worked. And then the second half of my presentation, I'm going to kind of talk very briefly about the specific skills that I gained during my time studying classics here at Maynooth. So as was mentioned in my bio, I went from Maynooth to NYU. I got my master's degree in Irish, Irish American, and English literature. I also served as an editorial and research fellow for the American Journal of Irish Studies while I was there. That was primarily doing proofreading, copy editing, some basic research, and some basic kind of fact checking. Anybody interested in going to the US for postgraduate study, I would highly recommend doing what I did and research fellowships and scholarships. It can be quite expensive, so I was very lucky that I was able to get a fellowship while I was there, which covered about 75% of my tuition. After I graduated from NYU, I knew that I wanted to stay on that academia track. So I applied for PhD programs, again, in the US. They tend to be a lot better funded. They give you stipends. So I had a living wage and I didn't have to worry overly about having a second job while I was there or applying for new research funding while I was there. So I was at Emory for quite a number of years. It takes roughly 5 to 6 years to get a PhD in the US. I think it looks a little bit different in Ireland. I think most PhD programs in Ireland can be between 3 and 4 years. But I was there for a while. There's a heavy teaching focus in PhD programs in the US, which was a skill set that I felt I really needed to develop. I had primarily been doing research while I was at NYU, and I wanted to be able to get in front of some students while I was at Emory. So I worked as a teaching assistant to begin with. So I would do kind of small scale lectures with kind of intro courses to British literature, English literature. Then I was a graduate instructor for 2 intro courses. In the US, they have liberal arts degrees for undergraduates. which means that you take a cross section of classes as requirements. So you would take classes in English, you would take classes in math, science, etc., so that you can get a sense of where your strengths lie before declaring your major. So I was doing the classes that were required for English. So it was teaching composition, rhetoric, things like that, basically teaching students how to write at a university level. And from there, I also worked as a research and engagement fellow at our university library. And that was more so focused on helping students who were doing their own research projects. So I was serving as kind of an additional resource for them to navigate the library spaces and the library resources. So usually what one does when you graduate from the PhD programs, you go onto the academic job market and you try and take all of those skills that you learned from your postgraduate career and turn it into a tenure track position, which is kind of like the white whale of postgraduate education. I knew that at this point, I did not want to stay in academia. As much as I enjoyed teaching when I was at Emory, I just didn't feel like I was the best fit for that. So I had to do something which is kind of always very tough and make a mid-career pivot. So I had to adapt kind of on the fly, and I had to take some of my transferable skills from both undergraduate and graduate level, and then turn that into a new position somewhere else in a kind of adjacent industry. So the industry I chose was publishing. So I ended up at Bloomsbury, USA. It took me, fair warning, it took me roughly, I want to say, anywhere between 8 and 10 months to get my first position in publishing. There are some industries where there are not a ton of job openings and it can take a little while, but it was paid off. It was worth it. I started at the internship level. From there, I was assigned to the children's trade division. And from there, I was promoted to production editor. And I specifically work with Sarah J. Maas. If anybody reads those books, you might recognize a couple of covers. But I started with children's books, which are always really fun. They're really sweet and cute. So the top ones up there, Witchling's Wish and Jump In, they were full color illustration books. So I would copy edit, I would proofread, I would liaise with design, I would liaise with production in the UK, and also our editorial teams. And I would basically make sure that the manuscript that the author and the editor had collaborated on together, it was handed to me. Then I would hire copy editors and freelance proofreaders. They would tidy it up, get it to the standard it's supposed to be grammatically, and I would check their work then. And from there, it goes off to the printer after several rounds of checks and rechecks. And I also worked with our design team to finalize the covers, these really sweet covers that you can see. So I would basically, my job is to check that we haven't made any embarrassing mistakes on the covers, got it triple, double, quadruple check that author name. Don't want that to be wrong. I also help to copy edit and proofread the blurbs that you see on the backs of the books. And I also double check the prices, ISBNs, kind of some tedious things like that. But normally my day-to-day is really fun. I get to kind of read books before they hit the shelves usually. I get to kind of help design, make some choices about, some of the art, some of the positioning. I get to look at these beautiful kids illustrations quite often, and I get to in addition to copy editing and proofreading the text for those books, I also kind of proof the images for children's illustrations. So if, a kid on one page has a green t-shirt, I make sure that he doesn't have a green t-shirt with stripes a couple of pages later, things like that. So I love my job. I think I'm far better suited to this job. It requires me to both be a team player when I'm kind of keeping this manuscript on track with multiple different teams. But I'm also spending a lot of time just with the books themselves and going through these texts. So I want to talk more so, rather than getting into kind of the specifics of my current job, although if anybody's interested in publishing, very happy to talk one-on-one if you want to hear more about that. But I did want to spend most of my time talking about the specifics of the skills that I gained while I was here at Classics and kind of post-grad as well. So the kind of key transferable skills, as was previously mentioned, for me, the one that I really want to talk about, and I think a lot of undergraduate students in my experience underestimate, is the opportunity to practice your writing skills. Writing, no matter what career you go into, whether it's medicine, law, IT, anything, education, you are going to be writing every day in some format. You're going to be writing emails. 80% of my job is writing coherent, concise emails, and you are going to be writing job applications. right? It starts even before you get into that job. You're going to have to write cover letters. You're going to have to write CVs. So do not underestimate the importance of being able to take classes that center writing and critical thinking skills. And that for me really is where classics was most important. So I took English too, and English absolutely also gave me that background, but English was kind of more so focused on the literary analysis side of things. Whereas with classics, I got to do not only the literary analysis, but I was also doing history, I was doing philosophy, I was doing art, I was doing kind of social cultural critiques. So it gave me a chance to practice in different writing styles. And that's really what's key. And it was for me in my professional career, my advancement. When I went to my master's degree program, I had initially thought it would be primarily centered on literature. I would be doing more of this literary analysis. But in fact, the teachers and faculty there really focused on historical criticism. It focused on historical research. It focused a little bit on cultural analysis. So it was this kind of mix of things. So the interdisciplinary nature of this program can really, really benefit you if you feel like maybe you don't want to only do English. Maybe you want to do a kind of like a little bit of everything. And that for me was kind of key. But it kind of like allows you to develop kind of your critical thinking skills too. Because if you're writing a paper on, say, you know, Homer's Iliad, right? You're taking a very specific kind of approach to that paper. You're kind of writing more so from a literary analysis point of view. But if you then go into a class where you're writing about Plato and Socrates, you have to kind of take a different track to that research specifically, but also that writing and the way that you're going to structure your argument and structure your papers. So that constant kind of flexibility that this course gives you, I've used that throughout. I've used that at my graduate level when I was in Emory. It was funny, actually, the first class that I had, the very first class that I sat down to, the first reading assignment that we were given was Aristotle. And I already had this kind of background in these philosophers and these thinkers, so that I was able to kind of have some familiarity with that source material and kind of be comfortable with the way it was being applied to kind of more contemporary texts that we were looking at. So that's always helpful. It's also interesting to me when I was teaching, I was a graduate instructor, as I said, and I was teaching these intro courses. So I was teaching students very who had just gotten to the university level. Often it was the first course that they took at the university level. They were still figuring things out. They were still figuring out their writing styles. But I had a lot of, again, this is US specific, but US universities tend to be quite expensive. So you tend to get students that are very single-minded and are going into pre-law, going into pre-med. They know what they want. They want to go into business and marketing, and they don't feel that these writing courses are particularly useful for them. They kind of posture that it's a bit of a waste of their time. And then they would write something and they wouldn't actually be able to put a kind of coherent argument together. And it was funny to me because I have a good friend who works in anesthesiology. He's a doctor, he works in medicine. And he had to do a round of job applications a couple of years back. And he just could not get these cover letters together. He sent me emails every single day asking me to proofread these things for him, asking me to check that he was actually giving them what they were looking for in those cover letters, because he just had not taken the classes that would give him those skills. And it's important, right? We overlook these things because we think we only need kind of more specific kind of mechanics to occur, like a type of job like that. But you will always be writing, so you will always need this practice. So in addition to those kind of composition and rhetoric skills, as I said, also thinking critically, creatively. My mid-career pivot required me to be kind of very creative in the way that I spoke about my transferable skills, because the things they look for in publishing, they don't necessarily look for in academia. So you have to be able to write those cover letters that show those skills off. Again, the kind of writing that you will practice in this course, in this program, it will give you those skills. It will give you that background. I also, and this is more specific to my chosen career path, I got very specific foundational knowledge around philosophical and literary texts that have proven very, very useful. You know, we use these kinds of texts almost in our everyday language without thinking about it. If you think of the Hippocratic Oath, right? Like all doctors take this oath for ethics standards. That originates with a Greek physician. If you think about the term, you know, Platonic love, for instance, that originates with Plato and his ideas on the universal versus the individual. Personally, I used the terms ethos, pathos, logos when I was teaching, and that originates with Aristotle. So there's these kind of like snippets that have kind of popped up again and again throughout my life that I feel like I can always kind of connect back to the things that I was learning here, which is always fun. I kind of love finding those little things that I didn't think about. I think I took a class here. It was, I believe it was on like Greek medicine at one point, with Maeve O'Brien, Dr. Maeve O'Brien, I believe. But it tracked where the term hysteria comes from and the way in which it's applied to females in medicine. And it's appalling and terrible, but fascinating. And I always kind of think about that every now and again whenever I'm a patient in a hospital dealing with physicians who will listen to me. But this kind of leads into the final couple of points that I wanted to talk about, kind of the personal kind of bonus points for my own career and postgrad life that classics has given me. So in addition to this kind of foundational knowledge, I found in publishing, there has been this huge resurgence in modern retellings of classical myth. So if you've ever spent time on TikTok, specifically Book Talk, I think you might have come across Song of Achilles at some point by Madeline Miller. She's, again, this is an unintentional plug, but Bloomsbury UK is her publisher. But she exploded in popularity. There's this story about Achilles and Patroclus, and it had a very kind of modern kind of resonance for readers. But she was taking very creative liberties with the original source materials, and having this background in classics, having taken these courses, having read these source materials, I'm able to kind of speak with my colleagues about why that book was so successful, and specifically why the creative liberties that she took with that book were so impactful for her audiences. So I think usually those kinds of books, they tend to have staying power when they're both kind of appealing to a modern audience, kind of mass audience, but also appealing to a more niche audience who might be looking at these in a critical manner. And she does that beautifully. But I'm also able to kind of like explain that to my colleagues who maybe have not read the Iliad before, or have not read the Aeneid or the Odyssey or anything like that. So that's kind of like a fun kind of thing about my background that I get to kind of bring to my professional life. But I wanted to kind of wrap up one final point that I think actually is often one of the more overlooked points too, is that for me, picking classics at the graduate level or the undergraduate level, it came just from my own personal love of the subject. Like I got to study it in Miss O'Grady's classrooms for many years. And so I was able to pick something that I felt really strongly about. And that's really important at the university level. Because again, I've come across students, undergraduate students, again and again, who pick courses based only on what they want their career to look like. And that sometimes pigeonholes them a little bit. It doesn't really give them space to maneuver. But it also means that you sometimes end up in classrooms where you don't particularly love the material you're reading, you don't particularly love the material you're studying for, the exams that you're taking. With this, it never felt like a chore. Like there was a lot of space for kind of joy in my learning process. And I think university should be about that a little bit. Like we can't forget that that's also part of the learning process, is things that just you enjoy reading, things that you enjoy studying. And for me, classics was always that subject. It took me to a very different kind of place, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any more specific questions if people have about publishing or about these transferable skills that I've talked about. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next speaker is Giacomo Peru. He's a native of Sardinia, like myself. He studied in Sassari and Rome, and has lived, also in Dublin and currently in Edinburgh. So he's talking to us from Edinburgh today. Giacomo attended the Liceo Classico, which is a secondary school which has a strong focus on classical subjects in Italy. And he particularly loved the ancient Greek and Latin there. After high school, he tried economics at the university, but he didn't like it. So he returned to his comfort zone, enrolled in a classics degree, which he finished a few years later with a dissertation on a speech written by an ancient Greek speechwriter for a tribunal process about a disputed property. After his degree in classics, Giacomo moved from Rome to take a master's in European politics and economics. He moved to Dublin, where he worked at a banking call center. He is currently employed at the University of Edinburgh in a supercomputing center, where he works with programmers and researchers in every field. And he remains closely connected with the classical antiquity, with the classical world, as his partner is also a lecturer in the same university. So I leave the stage to you, Giacomo. Thank you for talking to us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Giacomo, and it's a pleasure to participate in the event. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, because I've got a little bit of echo. Okay, so it's a pleasure to participate in this event, and I would like to thank Cosetta, with whom I share being from Sardinia and having studied and loved classics. So I'll start sharing. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, thank you.
I am Italian, and I was born and bred in Sardinia, an island in the Mediterranean Sea, famous for its beautiful seaside, its cheap and friendly people. I studied classics at high school first, and then at university, which means between the age of 15 and 29, with some interruptions when I traveled and when I tried to study economics. I concluded university a few years later in Milan with a master's in classics and dissertation on a legal speech by an ancient Greek speechwriter named this sort of ancient bard. During my years as a student of classics, I was generally very interested in what I was studying, happy with the human and cultural environment around me, and I never thought that I was studying the wrong subject. What has kept me interested in classics for so many years? What did I find in the study of classics? Well, before answering this, let me sketch out what classics was for me in the years when I was studying. Classics is not just one subject, it is a world of subjects. In fact, it is a world. It's the passport where so much of our living culture takes shape. Our languages, our words, organized knowledge, our values, our society, institutions, and more. Classics in my time was organized in three main areas: languages and literature, ancient history and philosophy, archaeology. These are all interconnected, interdependent, and cross-pollinated each other. So classics could be the study of old languages, particularly ancient Greek and Latin. This was my area of study. I was always fascinated by the mechanism of languages and by the way languages are related. For example, the relation and similarity between distant languages like Irish, Greek, Latin, Persian, Sanskrit. These languages sound different. They are written in different scripts or were spoken by populations so far away from each other. And yet they come from the same ancestor. And to a closer look and to an attentive reader, they do still have so many similarities. In particular, the words for the family members, the animals, the element of nature. Literature in Old Greek and Latin is a wider concept than modern literature, as it encompasses technical writing such as historiography, science, law. For those with an interest in literature, this is the most beautiful world, with immortal works such as the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, the Aeneid by Virgil, the first works of Western theater, a wealth of poetry, historiography, and novels. The themes of Greek and Latin literature are drawn from an overly rich heritage of myths, but also by history and real life. These literatures have shaped all subsequent Western literature, Italian, Irish, French, English, and so forth, to a huge extent, and they are still very present in our culture, not only in written works, but also, for example, in cinema. Classic history stretches roughly between the era of Homer and the fall of the Roman Empire. the era of Homer about 800 BC, the fall of Roman Empire roughly 400 AD. Going through chapters like the Persian Wars, Alexander the Great, the Roman Civil War, the Gallic War, the barbarian invasions. Philosophy is another very important subject within classics, and once again has a wider scope than in modern times, as it includes sciences, mathematics, and music. Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, Archimedes are some names which might be familiar to you. Archaeology is probably the most adventurous of the subject areas within classics. As it involves field work, digging site, and travel. When I was studying Sassari, my university colleagues in archaeology were digging in a Roman site in Tunisia, North Africa, a city called Ukimayus, and used to recount great stories of their experience there. In Sardinia, where I was studying, they would be mainly digging our nuraghi, or prehistoric tombs, the most important Bronze Age heritage of the island. While strictly speaking, classics refers to the Greek and Roman civilization, it can be a gateway to the study of other civilizations which more rarely constitute in our schools and universities autonomous subject areas. I refer, for example, to Celtic studies, ancient Middle Eastern civilization like Assyrians, Hittites, Phoenicians, the ancient Egyptians, Sanskrit, and much more. Altogether, studying classics means entering a colorful world populated by a variety of themes that can easily attract and hold the interest of many. But how does studying classics prepare us for our work life? When I was studying classics, I was not thinking about what I would do subsequently. I was not focusing on how I would use my degree, what career I would undertake after university. But once I have completed my degree, it was time to think about a job. The jobs that specifically require a degree in classics are mainly to be found in schools, university, and cultural institutions such as libraries or museums. I was not particularly interested in any of them. After my degree, then, I went on to take a postgraduate master's in European politics and economics, which was instrumental to finding a job in the area of research or research funding, administration and management, which is the job that I currently do. So, since 2013, I have worked at the University of Edinburgh in a supercomputing center called EPCC. What is a supercomputing center? What are my colleagues and what do I do there with a background in classics? A supercomputing center is a place which hosts and runs supercomputers and manages the services around them. Supercomputers, as the name suggests, are very large computers with exceptional power of computing. They are extremely fast, usually millions of times faster than tablets, laptops you might see every day. Supercomputers allow us to understand things that are too difficult to see or measure in real life. They may be too big, small, dangerous, quick, slow, or too expensive to simulate on normal computer. For example, you might have seen a weather forecast, but did you know that this was obtained using a supercomputer? Or how about new medicines? By simulating how potential medicines interact with the body, we can significantly speed up the time it takes to create new medicines. Supercomputer can help make planes, boats, and cars safer and more efficient to reduce pollution. Have you ever wondered how different dinosaurs moved and how fast they could run? We can't see this in real life, but we can model this on a supercomputer. Supercomputers are also used in archaeology, for example, in the reconstruction of ancient environments and buildings. Artificial intelligence. If you heard of ChatGPT, supercomputers play a crucial role in enabling the training and operation of large language models like the one at the base of ChatGPT. Supercomputers work in a similar way to the way we use a computer. You start with real-world observation, formulate a model, and then create a computer algorithm, like a recipe. An algorithm is a set of step-by-step instructions, like a recipe, but to be performed by a computer. These need to be followed in the correct order, or things could go wrong. In the same way people use languages to communicate with each other, programming languages allow you to communicate with a computer. They allow you to tell the computer what to do through a series of instructions. My colleagues are a mix of technical people, programmers, IT people, engineers, physicists, and non-technical people like myself, doing admin, organization, finance, and management. At EPCC, my job is non-technical, which means I don't directly deal with supercomputers, nor do I write computer code. My work has to do with project management, which means ensuring that research projects have access to the resources they need and that they deliver their planned research outputs in the time allocated to them. My background in classics and the skills I have retained from studying classics have been very precious for my adaptation to this new environment. While I work in an environment dominated by the so-called STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, I never felt unequipped to interact with my colleagues and the type of language and problems that we face day to day. In fact, the training in linguistics, logic, and analysis that I went through while studying classics has enabled me to handle some of the technical aspects of my workplace, like computer programming. A classicist friend of mine tells his students that even if they forget everything they ever learned about the ancient world on the day of their graduation, they will still retain the skills of research, processing, analysis, understanding, and communication forever after their degrees. And these are the skills that are needed in so many jobs. The main skills are analysis and communication, for example, mastering a large and complex body of data about another time and another place, challenges of method relating how to read antiquity, how to systematize and synthesize the whole picture, whether it is about daily life, love, politics, law, philosophy, entertainment, or whatever. Then there is the next step of how to communicate the findings to a new audience, and classics degrees typically involve a lot of writing, mediation of results, communicating with third parties who are not specialists. Obviously, in politics, journalism, media, analysis, and communication are important, but they are also important in engineering, IT, economics, and often the companies or institutions that specialize in such things need humanities graduates who have analysis and communication skills for different parts of their operation. So a lot of people with humanities degrees end up doing very well paid work as part of a chain of tasks that involve, etc. I believe that studying classics gives people useful skills which can certainly be used as grounding for a diverse range of careers and professions. I also believe that classics cultivates people's souls, making us more able to understand and cope with the world around us. An important skill gained from classics is the ability to better understand where we come from, why we, as individuals and as a society, we are culturally, why we speak in this way, why we use certain concepts, what we organize our knowledge and understanding of the world where we live in a certain way. This is not a trivial skill and can be the baseline for a robust and healthy relationship with the world where we live. Indeed, this also applies to the digital world in which we are now all immersed. Classics equips us with robust intellectual tools to navigate the modern digital world. Even though I don't work with classics, I am still very much connected with the world of classics professionals because my partner is a well-known classicist. We met 15 years ago in Dublin, and at that time he was a part-time lecturer here in Maynooth. So thank you all for listening to my talk, and thank you again, Cosetta, for organizing this event. I hope that today we will succeed in making our young audience curious and interested in classics, a subject that we love and that has rewarded us so much throughout our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Now, our next speaker is Emma Doran, who completed her BA in History and Ancient Classics here at Maynooth and graduated in 2012. Emma is an executive librarian with Kildare County Libraries, with responsibility for Athy, Ballitore and Castledermot libraries. Previously, Emma has worked as a library manager in Leixlip Library with Kildare County Libraries and a Special Collections and Archives Library Assistant at Maynooth University. In 2016, Emma graduated with her Masters of Library and Information Science from UCD. She has since completed courses in Understanding and Managing Rare Books at the University of Dundee in 2018 and in Leadership and Management with UCD in 2020. Emma is actively involved with the Library Association of Ireland and has recently been awarded her Associateship Nominals. So thank you for being with us, Emma.
Okay, so Careers of Classics, my odyssey into the world of libraries. I call it an odyssey because I had no idea what I was doing. When I did my Leaving Cert, I had just turned 17. A little bit like our first speaker, I asked someone what I should do and I was told landscape architecture would fit very well for me and would be a great career. So it was a bit of a journey to get where I am today. I ended up in UCD studying landscape architecture. I then, after about a year of doing that, I realized this really isn't for me. I was a little bit like, what do I do? I'm going to have to tell my parents, you know, I can't do this for another 3 years. I really don't want to be a landscape architect. So I put together a presentation. I sat down in front of my parents and I said, look, I really want to do an arts degree in Maynooth University, particularly thinking I would become a teacher. I would do history and English, and I'd take my fun subject, which would be classics, which is something I just always had an interest in, but never had the opportunity to study before university. So my parents agreed. They allowed me to quit my degree in UCD, having passed my first year, and I enrolled here in Maynooth University. Funnily enough, like our first speaker also said, you know, you come in with a plan and you have 3 subjects. I did not drop classics after my first year like I thought. I actually dropped English. So that put a bit of a spanner in the works for my education career, or so I thought. In 2012, I graduated here from Maynooth University and I sat down with some of the amazing lecturers who had guided me on my path here in classics. In particular, Dr. William Desmond and Dr. Kieran McGroarty. You could say they're a little bit like my real life oracles. They actually guided me to a gap year, and I thought I would spend a year teaching English in Japan just to see, you know, if teaching was still on the cards for me. That ended up turning into 3 years and a range of adventures in Japan. highly advise it. Like if you do want to travel, it's really great, and classics really does kind of open the mind and give you like a curiosity for other cultures. I returned home then in April 2015. I had applied for a master's in teaching, but because my subjects were history and classics, it was a little difficult to actually find a school to do my master's in. So we pulled the plug on that plan. I hope that my talk here today is showing you that it is okay to take so many twists and turns and to not be sure and to just, trust in yourself, and you will get there. So I had a couple of months before September to figure out what I was going to do. I ran into, again, Dr. William Desmond in the corridors here, and he said it's been a long time, we have a chat. So I ended up chatting to himself and again to Dr. Kieran McGroarty, and they said to me, like, oh, we always thought you'd make a very good librarian. So it's like, libraries, haven't looked into that, similar enough to teaching. Let's do a little bit of research. I applied to UCD to do a master's in library and information science for September. I was accepted. Maynooth University again supported me here. They allowed me to do 8 weeks in working in the library, which then brought me into my degree. I spent a year in UCD doing the degree full time and learned how valuable classics actually was. Libraries is quite a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary subject in terms of every day is going to be different. There's so many different types of librarians. Most of you probably think, sure, you just stamp books for the day-to-day. You can be law librarians, health science librarians, special collections librarians, are working with archives, rare books and maps. You can work in public libraries, law libraries, etc. So this kind of started my career in libraries. After graduating from classics, I took a summer contract. So it was just 3 months working for Kildare Libraries, which ended up being extended. I worked then from 2016 to 2017 as a library assistant, which is an entry-level position and comes with 27 days of annual leave. Very important once you graduate. From there, I moved into my interest, and this is definitely where classics supported me. I was fascinated with history, with art, with all of the things that we had studied, and during my course, I became just absolutely besotted with archives and rare books. So I worked here in Maynooth University from 2017 to 2019 in the Special Collections Department. And there are some real treasures if you do decide to come here. There's even like an original proclamation in the archives there. So be sure to check out the collections if you do come. I took another pivot then. Usually librarians would kind of stick to one track. You kind of come out, you go into academics, work in universities, or you might work in health sciences, or you might decide I'm interested in law and pivot that way. I'm a bit of a hybrid librarian, so I've kind of jumped, hence the odyssey. So I actually moved back into public libraries then, and this was my first management role that I received. I jumped into a management role in Leaksip Library as a branch manager. So this involved managing a team of people. I used skills from classics there. I'll get more into that in my next few slides. Managing budgets, the building, buying and purchasing for our collections, lots of things that I never imagined I would do, and all things that my classics degree supported. And then recently I've actually been promoted up to an executive librarian in Kildare County Council. So this means instead of managing one library, I now manage 3. And considering we have 15 libraries in Kildare in total, that's actually quite a chunk. So these are some of the skills that I would have learned then in my degree. I have them written up here just in case I forget myself. But probably most importantly, research skills. In classics, I learned so many research skills, and you really did have to learn in terms of pivoting. So say, for example, you're writing an essay and you don't speak Latin. You need to find a translation, or you need to find a translation that's not full of grammatical errors. The ability to research, collate and analyse materials has been hugely important. Communication, effective listening skills, written skills and communication skills. The amount of employers who will actually tell you that graduates come out of university and they can't write, they can't do a CV, and your reading, writing and listening skills will take you so far, and classics is amazing for this. Problem solving, your critical evaluation skills and the ability to interpret resources. This helps like day to day in terms of your budgets. For me, figuring out, are we going to fix the library roof? Are we going to put more into our collections? Can we take on more staff members, etc. Computer literacy, which is very important for lifelong learning, being able to use emails. Your day-to-day when you leave libraries, unfortunately, is going to be a lot of emails and communicating. You're going to, through email, through phone call, through meetings, and writing up briefs. Like myself, you may even be involved in writing strategic plans for the government and things. So your writing skills and computer literacy are hugely important. Data analysis and the ability to use methodologies to collect, quantify, analyse and interpret data can be used across a range of skills, like whether it's in computer analysis or if you're just going through, again, your budgets and reports. Leadership skills, the ability to think logically, be impartial and formulate and make decisions, hugely important. Which brings us to decision making, adaptability and resourcefulness. So these would be some of the skills then that I myself would use day to day in the library to do my job. Probably most importantly, my ability to work along with people in other fields, classics being multidisciplinary, like you're learning languages, you're learning arts, history, etc. You're working with so many different fields. So being able to actually look at yourself in your job and connect with people, whether they're working in health services, the government sector, and even in universities, and building relationships like this, it's hugely important. So what kind of skill sets then set me apart? Because, as I've said, it's an interdisciplinary field, I feel it really set me apart in terms of graduates. Many graduates, as you have heard, are one-track minded. They come in, they know exactly what they want to do. When you're dealing with classics, you're learning so many different things. You're not just looking at history or anthropology, literature, religion. You're looking at your gender studies, women in history, etc. And that gives you such a broad scope. And then when you actually get into the workforce and you're dealing with, not just a one-track mind, and you're dealing with all these different things coming at you, it's hugely important to be able to keep your cool, analyse, rationalise, and keep it going. So to this day, I think it actually prepared me very well for working in libraries, which itself is a multitude of disciplines, and you never know what you're going to be faced with. Again, did any of my training in classics make a difference in terms of my career in the application stage and long term? Definitely the research. Research is crucial if you're job hunting. You want to be able to look at the job spec. You want to see, is it a good fit for you? And the ability to read between the lines in terms of what they're looking for and what skills that you can actually provide. Long-term research is a core skill. We would often have students like yourselves coming in looking for help with projects and things like that. So being able to guide you to sources that are accurate and factually correct are hugely important. This doesn't want to work. And again, reading and writing. You do learn intensive reading skills in classics, large quantities of reading, so it's good if you're a fan. But also how to read critically and inform yourself, identify arguments and positions in a text. This is hugely important. Again, it benefits in terms of job descriptions. So if you're looking at, say for the county council or for a public government role, you're looking at a multi-page document where they're telling you what they're looking for, what kind of competencies they're expecting from you when you get the job, and being able to actually read through these, narrow down your text and decipher what they're looking for is hugely helpful in terms of shaping your CV and then writing it correctly so that you're landing that job interview. It's also extremely important, say for example, if you are thinking of going into a government job like myself, you'll often have large documents where you have CEO reports, you have strategic plans, you have national initiatives, and these are all things that you need to study before you sit in front of that interview board so that you can answer any question that they throw at you. And being able to actually critically look at these, take out and find the important information and bank that is hugely important. And again, core skills for my day-to-day role. So, in terms of skills that I learned and experiences, again, I feel like a broken record, but I'm very sorry. Research plays a huge part in the role of a librarian, and the ability to find, weigh and judge and interpret information is a core skill day to day, whether you're working in a special library or a public library. Because it is an interdisciplinary nature, librarianship is a multifaceted career. There's so many different types, as we've spoken about previously, and being able to work in so many fields and kind of form relationships with people is huge. So you're not going to get that big scare in terms of, what did I do? I didn't do this in school. This is different. You're not going to panic because you've already done it in university level with your classics degree. Lessons for the past. This is probably one of the most important things. Respect for other cultures and points of view. As a librarian, we have to be impartial and inclusive and diverse, particularly with our collection development. We don't gatekeep or censor. And being able to think critically about big social questions, including issues like gender, identity, race, ethnicity, and difference and inequality are all important, not only for understanding the world that we live in, but for also making library services accessible to all and ensuring that your collections have something that everyone needs. That is probably the biggest takeaway and skill that you will learn doing classics at graduate level. Did I always intend to be a librarian? Absolutely not. When I came to Maynooth University, like I said, I thought I was going to be a teacher. I had no clue what I wanted to do, and that was absolutely okay. I took some very wise advice, and you've heard it from two of our speakers here today in terms of like, do something that you love, something that you enjoy, and you will find your way through. You will find your path and what you're supposed to do. And one little tidbit with that is, even on the hard days when you think, oh my God, I absolutely hate my job, if at the core of it you really love what you're doing and you're enjoying it, the hard days aren't so hard after all. Advice that I would give to you in terms of entering the market, use skills that you learn and develop in your classics degree and polish them. Take these transferable skills because you have no idea how far they'll actually take you and make you shine in comparison with other graduates. Get familiar with researching and critical thinking. This will take you so many places and open so many doors, as we've discussed. If you are looking to work in libraries, probably no harm in doing a part-time job while you study, if you like, in libraries. Many of them do. They kind of have evening hours and things like that, so you get that little bit of experience and you can see if you actually enjoy the role. Networking. Networking is huge. You work with so many different people, so many different careers, and be it the HSE or universities, different universities around the world. Like, use your communication skills, foster these relationships, and they will take you so far. It's so important in terms of building your career. Cheesy again, but do something that you love, and the hardest days are easier. And 11 years on, does classics actually play a role in my life? 1000% yes. From the genres of the books that I read, to my role, it plays a huge part of my working day to day. And perhaps the greatest evidence then is last week returned to Italy for our honeymoon and just absolutely spent 2 weeks enjoying everything from architecture, art, language and food. So I hope that you all take odysseys of your own and have adventures, and most importantly that classics, if you do decide to pursue it, will be hugely beneficial for you, and mistakes are okay. That's how you grow. Thank you.
Here we go. Our next speaker is Rebecca Dunwoody, who studied music technology and classics here at Maynooth, and Rebecca graduated in 2019. And she started a career as a part-time administrative assistant in a small accountancy firm in Dublin city centre during her final year of university. After graduation, during a planned year-long break from education, Rebecca worked full-time as credit controller before eventually being offered a training contract. Fast forward 4 years post-graduation, and Rebecca has sat her finals for her ACA qualification and is working as a financial accounting manager on the finance team for the National Pediatric Hospital Development Board. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks.
To go forward and the pointer to the back.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Hi, yeah, so thanks, Cassette, for the introduction. My name is Rebecca, and I am only 4 years graduated, so I'm very early on in my career, very early. But as Casetta said, I'm currently the financial accounting manager in the NPH. That's the crowd building the new children's hospital. So I'm on the finance team there. So big scary job half the time. But as Casetta mentioned, I graduated back in 2019. There's me, graduation day. And I can safely say I had absolutely no plans to become an accountant. I was an ordinary level maths student from a Leaving Cert. Was told by my maths teachers I'd do nothing because I couldn't do maths. I was useless. I'd make no career for myself, especially with numbers. So you can imagine the day I finally meet him again, what I tell him I do for a living. But yeah, so I graduated and I started working as a credit controller. And that was kind of where I first really noticed all the skills I developed studying classics, transferring into a professional career. As a credit controller, normally you just monitor your clients' credit days, but any who are particularly overdue, it was up to me to get in touch with them, communicate with them, and sort of have a conversation with them as to why they weren't paying their fees, basically. And if you've ever, you probably haven't, but a credit control email can be quite bog standard and robotic. But we had to be very aware of any clients, perhaps where there was maybe a sensitive situation, or we wanted to foster a really deep professional relationship, or kind of just stand out a bit more to them because they're a big client, you know. And that's, like I said, where I saw some of the skills from classics coming in. I spent 3 years doing every single essay that was ever provided for us. I don't know if it's still the way, but they weren't always mandatory. I did every single essay. So say you get 3 modules in semester 1, you have 3 essays, multiply that by whatever, 2 years, 3 years, I was just doing that constantly every semester. So my language level really, really, really grew. And that transferred into emails. You know, I'd be sending an email off to a client, you know, maybe providing them with a solution, telling them maybe what we can arrange for them in order to pay their fees, so everyone kind of comes out on top. And I could say they always thought I was older than I was. The amount of times I got addressed as Mrs. Dunwoody, who's my mother, not me, was quite high. And not only did it transfer into the way I wrote, but it transferred into the way I spoke to them. You know, I worked in a private financial services firm. I had to have a really, really high level of English. I had to speak to them really well. I had to represent the company in a really in a good way. So that was kind of where I really saw those skills shining through at first. There we go. Yeah. So there's me studying. I think I'm doing capital appraisal and risk and investments. Didn't enjoy that very much anyway. But as I was working in a small firm, I kind of said to them, I want a bit more from this. And they offered me the training contract on the spot. You know, and I said to them, like, no, I'm a classics graduate, well, music tech and classics graduate. What can I bring? And they're like, no, you've demonstrated with working in credit control that you have the analysis skills, you have the verbal skills, you have the written skills to actually go and pursue an accountancy career, because accountants aren't just numbers people now. We actually do a whole lot of advice work. You know, clients will just come to us on a Friday evening saying, I need a solution by Tuesday afternoon. You need to get it to me. And that's what we do. It's not just numbers, you know, there's VAT, there's tax, there's investments, there's all sorts of things involved in that. So that made me a good candidate to pursue a chartered accountancy degree. So I started doing that, and language skills developed, verbal skills developed. One that I actually wasn't expecting to really transfer over was the research and analysis. So when you're writing an essay saying classics, you're given your list of sources from the bibliography, you know, that the lecturers provided you with. You've got to pull out a few, maybe 10. You're sitting in the library and you have to have that skill to quickly examine a text and see whether or not it's relevant to whatever point you're trying to make in your essay. That does transfer into accountancy. Got the revenue commissioners up there. As accountants, we have not a finite list of sources, but we have a good long list of sources. We've got revenue, the CRO, you have company law, and you have all the different financial accounting frameworks and auditing financial frameworks. If a client comes to you with a question or says, I don't know, do I need to disclose this in my financial statements? You need to say, okay, what are my sources? Can I quickly examine where I need to go and dig into it then? You know, find it quickly enough that, you know, you can provide a timely response to the client. So yeah, research analysis, very surprised that it transferred over very well, but it transferred amazingly. So that was that. The other one that I wasn't expecting too much was planning. So obviously I mentioned essay writing there. I did all the essays, do all the essays, because you really get to grow this discipline of planning out your essays. And as an accountant, yeah, there is a bit of planning, you know, if you have a big set of accounts to do, or maybe it's a new set of accounts from a new client, there is a good bit of planning to go, because you've got to understand the client. You know, you can't just start battering off, you know, going through TVs and general ledgers and all these sort of things. It doesn't work like that. You need to understand the client. So you have to research them. And that's particularly important in auditing. Auditing is, I don't know if you ever watched the news, Grant Thornton, all of them are constantly in trouble over not doing things properly. You've really got to make sure that you have that discipline to really go through all of your auditing standards, do all the planning. And your plans are constantly updated. And in an essay, your plans are constantly updated. You know, you might come across a new piece of information. You go, oh, that'll work in there. Same with an audit. You know, you'll come across something else and you go, okay, I need to update, account for that, maybe tailor for this, do a bit more audit work there, that kind of thing. Excuse me. It's all very, very, very relevant. So there's me now in the NPH, and someone looking very stressed over set of accounts. That'll be next week doing our month end. But all the skills I started to develop in practice, because I left practice and now I'm working kind of industry, public sector, still applies, and at a kind of a different level now. Prior to this, it was very much, I have my set client list of whatever 50 or so clients. They'll come to me with anything. I get in touch with them, you know, for their income tax information, their VAT return information, their payroll information, their accounts, all of that stuff. That doesn't really apply anymore. You know, I work in the NPH. We don't have a client. The client's the hospital. We have suppliers, so I'm dealing with suppliers now, and I'm managing, you know, the financial accounting for them. Excuse me. And research analysis still applies. Like I said, I'm doing the month end now next week. I'm in charge of doing the month end accounts every single month, and I assist with the year end accounts. But I can't just hand my manager the month end accounts and go, here you go, grant, that's grant. It's like, no, because that doesn't work like that. When I do the accounts, I have to do a very quick little bit of analysis. Nothing major, you know, it goes up above me anyway. But just any key trends that I've noticed, you know, what's driving a particular balance, and I need to have that skill then to go back to my accounting software, pull out that nominal and do an analysis of it, figure out what's driving the figure, why isn't that kind of what I was expecting, or is it on par? Yeah, grand. Have that information there ready to hand over to my manager. You look good then as well, you know, you took the initiative, you went ahead and you did that, you know, that makes you stand out. Excuse me. The verbal skills and the written skills do also still play a part. Obviously, like in any organization, we have a rake of policies and procedures we have to follow, and no policy and procedure stays the same all the time. Usually it's somewhat similar, but if there's a massive change in a team, you know, you have to kind of update the policy maybe to reflect if someone's come in and recommended a new way to do something and you start doing it. You can't have a policy from 2022 still showing the old way, because that's not right. You can't have that in business. So say if I'm in charge of updating a memo, that's me. If I have to draft a memo to send out to all the procurement officers about what you're meant to do if you're importing from the UK, because Brexit destroyed everything, it was just awful. I spent weeks researching all of the VAT customs excise information and pulling it together, because it's on you as the accountant to not only understand it, but then be able to communicate it in a way to a level of someone who's not financially literate. And again, essay writing in classics, being able to see the information, the text, the sources, and this isn't just coming from a place of plagiarism. No, but you don't want to just regurgitate something. You want to put your own twist on it. You know, you want to put your voice out onto the piece of paper. You want them to see what you have to say, what your opinion is, and that makes you stand out. In my final essay here in classics, I handed it in, and when I got the feedback, I was told, that's a really interesting way you looked at that. No one's ever done that before. You know, that's a really important skill to have. And the analysis and the research still applies. If I have one of the clinical engineers come to me and say, oh, Rebecca, show me, what's this? Like, what's left on this PO? What's been allocated against it since? And it could go back to 2016. You know, so that's a huge amount of analysis you have to do. But I have to present it to them in a way that they're going to understand. And that's my job. Like, that is the job of an accountant as well. So when you're writing, say, an essay here in classics, you can't just dump everything onto your A4 page or your Word document and fire it off. You can't. You won't pass, and that won't fly in business, and that won't fly when you're doing your final exams for accountancy. You have to format it in a way that's presentable. Excuse me. So when I run something off, I cut out whatever's unnecessary because they're not going to know what some of these references are. I'm going to know. My colleagues in finance are going to know. Clinical engineers aren't going to know. So I have to format it in that way. And that discipline of 3 years of writing essays really, really carried over. I'm so pedantic about how things are presented now. And that's not only just for, say, doing a small piece of work in-house. If any of you have any interest in doing accountancy, you may know this anyway, or just doing accounting in school, there are certain frameworks that we have to present accounts under. You can't just go off and present it whatever way you like, you know? You've got IFRS, you've got FRS. You can't stray, you can't mix and match. So there's only one way you can do it. And you do that the same when you're writing your essays. Can't remember the names of the ways you write them, but you know, you're doing your footnotes, or you're doing your references. It has to be the same. Has to be the same the whole way through, and that still applies in accounting. It's really, really important. You might not think it, but it actually is, and it does transfer. That skill really does transfer across very, very well. Excuse me. And another thing, maybe it's not, maybe it's a bit unconventional, or maybe it kind of still applies. When you're writing an essay, and this is again that skill that you've gotten from classics, you have to make your point. You know, and you can't just stand there going, maybe, no, I don't know. You have to stand firm in what you said to them, you know, because well, the lecturer's going to want to see you make an opinion, make a point and back it up with all of your appropriate sources. When if you're sitting the FAEs, which are the exams I just sat for my accountancy degree, they will mark you down for sitting on the fence, for not providing an opinion. You'll lose marks, and it's professional competence. It's a huge part of the exam. You can fail on low professional competence marks. You have to be really, really structured. And in work, if I'm handing over a project and someone comes to me and says, explain your method, explain why you think that solution is correct, I can say, all right, here you go. Here's the, you know, the plan I laid out. Here's the way I formatted it. Here's all the source information, and I know that's right. You know, and you have to be able to stand firm in what you've presented. That's your essay writing skill coming in there. And that skill, all those skills are so transferable to what you do. So, like I said, you might not think having a classics degree is any way helpful for pursuing an accountancy degree, but it is. I interviewed for a public services job before I started the accountancy degree. And I explained to them the degree I had, and I was doing credit control at the time, and I think it was an entry-level officer. Turned around to me, now I would have been 21, 22. They turned around and they said, actually, you could probably apply for an executive officer. You could actually have applied for a higher role. You have this much experience, you have such a good education, and you have such a broad education. Like I've got arts, music tech, and I've got accounting now. And even in a review recently with my own manager, he said it was so refreshing to actually see an accountant who did arts. You know, if you go on to do the ACA qualification, it doesn't matter whether you did accounting, economics, maths, or English and history. You're still going to have to sit some of the exams. It's just whether or not you want to sit all 17, whether you want to sit 15, or do you want to do a master's in accounting and sit 2 in final year, which sounds like absolute torture to me because final year is absolute. It's just so heavy going. So like, he was like, well, that's great. You went and you did something you wanted to do when you were 18, 19, 20, 21. You know, like, why wouldn't you have gone and done something interesting to you? Because now you just fell into accounting, but at least you did something you really wanted to do. And I chose Maynooth partially because they offered classics. That was a real big driving point when I chose what university I wanted to go to. So don't think just by studying classics, you might not get a finance degree or a finance job. You probably will. With me, I have, like I said, ordinary level maths from the Leaving Cert, and I'm an accountant. It's just, there's so much opportunity that is open to you by studying classics because you're bringing so many different skills that are so applicable to a variety of different disciplines. And yeah, I mean, just do it anyway. It's great fun. You know, you get to spend your days reading about different sort of ancient guys back in ancient Rome and Greece. It's good fun. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say anyway on that.
Thank you very much.
We resume our meeting with our last speaker for today. And just linking up to Rebecca's last point, you know, and the fact that a degree in classes can really lead you everywhere. I think Liam is the embodiment of that very statement. I've met Liam a long time ago, and is back here now to share some of his experience with us. So Liam was born in 1950. He gave consent to share the year of his birth, by the way. And so he sat Living Cert with honors Latin, may I point out, in 1967, before many of us were born. He then followed on and did an HDIP and a BA in German and Irish in UCD in 77. He's deeply interested in Irish, and that led him to take an MLit in Trinity in 1985. And more recently, he has returned to Trinity College Dublin to complete an MPhil in classics. And this is just very, very recent, and again, an example of a mature student returning to classics with a passion that sort of lasts a lifetime. So for the majority of his life, Liam was a secondary school teacher from 1971 to 2010. And he taught German and Irish, but also French and business, accountancy, management. So some of those subjects that were mentioned earlier on that one would not necessarily associate with classics. But Liam is interested in the ancient world, has been interested all of his life, and he took many further courses in classical subject after his Living Cert. He retired in 2010, and he decided to take an extramural course in ancient Greek in Trinity College Dublin, which sharpened his long-time interest in the language and laid a strong foundation for everything that followed. So out of some of those who took part in the same course, he decided to organize the ancient Greek study group, and others joined later, and the enterprise went on until 2020, meeting each week for 30 weeks in the year, when COVID put an end to it, but only virtually. The group still meets, is back in person, but is still met online. In 2021, Liam returned to Trinity College Dublin for an MPhil in Classics. He's just completed the course, and he's just handed his dissertation, so the results should be out soon, and we wish him best of luck with the results. So thank you for sharing your experience with us, Liam. The stage is yours.
This one here.
Yeah, slides. And then point at the back.
Okay, good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Liam Barrett, Irish is my first language, and so, but I'm pretty good at English, so I should be able to stay coherent, I hope. I feel very much like the odd guy out this morning, because here I am at the royal old age of nearly 73, speaking to you about your future careers. But I think I can say something. I think I can say something useful about a future career that is based on something to do with the classics. And one reason perhaps why I can is this. I've also had not just experience in teaching. I've started companies myself, and I've interviewed people. And I've been chairman of board of management of schools, and I've interviewed people for teaching and for principals. So I have some experience in sitting at the other side of an interview board table and looking at people as they come in. And I just wanted to give some of my thoughts on why I think classics graduates do well at interviews and how studying the classics primes your confidence. We all seek confidence. We all seek to have something upon which we can stand and feel this is solid. This is something I know and I am familiar with and I am comfortable with, and it is good. And this is something that you will acquire, I am quite certain, if you do classics well. Well, very important. Because if you do classics well, then you get insights into a whole different world, which actually isn't all that different after all. Not all that different after all. You read Medea, for example, or you watch that play, Medea, by the great Greek tragedian Euripides. And you see Medea and the plight she has put into when the man she has loved for years, who has given her 2 children, tells her almost casually, "You're gone. I'm marrying the king's daughter." And you watch what happens to her and the terrible outcome that arrives at the end. You'll never forget that play. The play written 2,500 years ago has now become 2023 in your mind, and as long as you live, you'll never forget it. You'll never forget it. Now that's just one thing, one very small thing, which I personally have received from the classics. Or again, you look at the history of, say, the Romans, and you ask yourself, how did an extraordinary empire grow from one small little town on the banks of a not very important river in the middle of Italy? How did this happen? That in the course of some hundreds of years, this became the greatest empire, you might say, in one respect, that the world has ever known. And then, of course, why did it fall? These are huge questions. And when you get into these questions, let me tell you something, they never leave you. They become part of your intellectual DNA. You change your intellectual DNA. Now, doing a classics degree, there's a little bit more than just that, actually, because you enter into the intellectual rigor of finding yourself in your ideas, developing your ideas, becoming comfortable with your ideas, and then uncomfortable with your ideas, because we always need to question. Always need to question. So, that's a little bit cheeky, by the way, that title. I should really say why classics graduate made you well at interviews. Nothing's guaranteed, but it does prime your confidence. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see if this works. Am I pointing it in the right direction?
Yeah.
Okay, so
maybe use the.
That's the B one. I have a little flashing blue light, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Maybe just use the buttons on the keyboard because I don't know.
Okay, easier.
Wait.
And
Yeah.
Okay.
Just that easier.
Yeah, okay, fine. So now my presentation, I'm afraid, is entirely wordy. I've no nice pictures. I'm sorry about this, but this is the way it is. Okay, so as you see, you're a classics graduate, and because you are a classics graduate, you will have proved things. You'll have proved that you're capable of undertaking and succeeding at highly challenging and complex tasks, that you can read and understand complex texts, that you can analyze, you can break things down, you can see how they're fitted together. And by the way, because you can analyze, you can also look at the individual parts and see, do they really fit? And does B really follow from A? And you can discuss. One of the greatest gifts we have, and where, for example, all rhetoric comes from, the ability to discuss, take things apart. You can, of course, think about, and then you're thinking about what? You're thinking about literature and art and history and myth and religion and philosophy and so many other things besides. But, for example, architecture, with which I am personally in love. I love architecture. And one reason is because I became enamored of classical architecture. And from that, as your template, you can go in all directions. So let me just bring us down here. There's an enormous amount. I could spend far, far too long up here talking about all of these items here, the literature, the art, the history, etc. It's just... Now, this has been said many times before. I think writing is the acid test. This is where you can't just simply waffle. You've got to put your ideas down black and white on paper, electronic paper if you like, but it has to go down black and white. And because you can do that, you prove things to yourself. You prove that you can understand your material. You show you can arrange it, you can put it in order, you can assess it. You know what's more important than what else. You can appraise it. You can draw valid conclusions from it, or you should be able to, and perhaps you can speculate and theorize about it as well. All of these things. And this is what makes learning so vitally interesting. You know the Latin word Interest, because that's what it is. Interest. You're right in the middle of it. That's what it's about. So, I'll try this one here. Okay, there's the prize. There's the prize. When you've done well as a class assist, then you've put your mind to doing something complex and difficult, and you've done it, and you've proved that you can and have developed and strengthened the powers of your mind. There's the prize. Now, the classics also makes an investigator of you. You will learn how to hunt down your material and how to make informed use of your sources. You learn to challenge assumptions. One of the most important gifts we have is the ability to be humble and to challenge ourselves, to say, oh, I know a lot and I'm pretty good at thinking about these things, but I'm not perfect. Nobody is. And if you're not perfect, there's always room for some improvement. And so you question yourself and you question your assumptions, you question your modus operandi, your way of doing things. Now, discussing ideas, one of the great gifts of a good classical education. You learn how to argue properly, well, intensely with fellow students, people, for example, in your project team, and you will have projects and you'll be working with people together, and of course then with your teachers. You also learn, incidentally, humility again, because you learn how to accept criticism. And you should also be good at learning how to criticize people, gently, properly, and again, humbly. And if you go on the linguistic side of the matter, then learning Greek or Latin or both, this is an extraordinary accomplishment. Anybody who's learned Latin well or Greek well can say, I'm pretty good. You can say that without any false humility. You can say that. So all the things that you'll get, for example, the ability to understand and to absorb and recall vocabulary, to learn your way through complex grammatical systems, these are the prizes. Latin and Greek are extraordinary in this respect too. You know, I sometimes tell people, we're so used to speaking our own language, English, in my case, and Gaeilge. Now, nothing that we've learned from English or Irish syntax will prepare you for Latin as written, Greek as written, because you have to take a sentence, and there's the elements of it, the various words and phrases. You have to almost throw them up in the air and see where they fall. Instead of, we have the cat sat on the mat. Now, in Latin, the mat sat cat on the. Could be the way it's written, depending. And you've got to have the intellectual flexibility to be able to see that this is how, in fact, it is. Now, isn't that an extraordinary good piece of training for the mind? So, you make your mind more nimble. You deal, as I say, deal with word, order, and sentences that are little in common with your familiar. Okay, and of course, you will coincidentally have enriched your ability in these and using English, your ability to learn better any of the daughter languages of Latin. Any of the daughter languages of Latin. Even the French, which looks quite distant in some respects. You go into, for example, a word like aujourd'hui and see what it's made up of. And there you see the Latin. So, language enrichment, coincidentally, you've enriched your ability in these and using English. Okay, I've said that. Good. Two great things from a classical education. Nos cate ipsum, know thyself, know yourself. Quaere verum, seek the truth. And seeking the truth helps you, of course, know yourself. Very difficult thing sometimes for us to know ourselves. Very difficult. But a really, really essential thing. And by the way, this is something else too. The spiritual side of what learning means. When you seek the truth, you make a commitment that changes your life. Changes your life. And personally speaking, I'm a believer from conviction, Christian, so forth, and I can say to you that this is an extraordinarily good thing. So, back to The interview. What do interviewers look for in people? What sort of person do they want for the jobs they have? Now, this is a very general list. It's obviously, it would have to be amended for particular topics. But look, number one, honesty. Actually, do you have somebody on the team whom you can trust? Because if you don't, you're in trouble. So you look for somebody who's honest, intelligent, obviously, enthusiastic and energetic, because you must bring energy into a team, and imagination and creativity. These are what help to change things and bring things up and on and beyond. And of course, you've got to be able to cooperate. You're part of a system, a thing put together, and if you can't cooperate, what good is it to your employer to have you there? If you're going to be in charge of people, you must be somebody who can motivate people, right? And you can take on complex tasks and you learn quickly. Now, I can tell you, when I sat on interview boards and I was looking at people across the table from me, this is the sort of thing that I would be checking on. This is the sort of thing. Of course, the other great piece of wisdom about interviews is this: from your point of view, for taking an interview, you must be sure that this job is something that will benefit from you being in it, if you know what I mean, that you are that person. And I think that a classics graduate who has done classics well will have this confidence in themselves to feel, yes, I can do that job. Yes. Actually, folks, in my experience, there are not many jobs that we can't do if we put our minds and attention to them and give it our energies. So I'm going to leave it at that. It's nearly time for lunch. So, got a meal mark go léir, áthar an bhainse cancel ar fad. So, and thank you, Cosetta, for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Liam. I'm sure everybody, is feeling very enriched from learning about the different experiences, background, of all of our speakers. We've learned so much, not just about the skills that a degree in classics equip us with, but also about practical, actual scenarios, professional environments in which these skills can be used, and certainly some surprises, because some of our speakers are employed in a context that we wouldn't really associate with classics, and still classics graduates fare really well and acquire all the abilities and more for pretty much any job. So again, the underlying message might be, one of the key messages that we take away from today might be that classics is not a vocational degree. It is one of the arts degrees, and it trains you with skills that are valuable, useful, but most importantly transferable, and they can be applied and they can guide you and serve you well in pretty much any career path that you decide to take. So we have 1 minute left. I mean, we're going to stay around in the room for a bit. So if any questions for our speakers? Any questions at all? Online? No? Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I have one question for Giacomo. Giacomo?
Yeah, one question for Giacomo.
Giacomo, I'm wondering, did you study computer science in school if you're working in a supercomputer company as well, along with classics?
Did you hear, Giacomo?
Yes. I never studied formally computer science, except some courses in programming when I was in high school, but this don't really count towards then getting a job where I work now. So no, I've always been interested in computers, a user, but not particularly a nerdy user. But it did help. As I said, the skills that I gained studying classics, especially linguistics, the understanding of the mechanism of language, did help me feeling comfortable with the people where I work and programming languages and this sort of stuff.
Thank you, Giacomo. Anyone else? No? Okay. I see nobody else online. Okay, in that case, I would like to thank everybody online, our speakers and the students, guidance counselors and teachers, our undergraduates who are attending online and in person, and for sharing their experience and for telling us where you go after you graduate in classics, and for coming back, especially for the Maynooth graduates, to tell us, I actually went here, I'm doing this, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and it's a very grateful experience to learn what happens to the future of graduates, and also to learn more definitely a learning experience for me, to learn about what kind of job. There are always new jobs that I'm surprised to hear that classes graduate end up acquiring. So I'm going to just turn the camera so that you can see the room, and a round of applause for all of us today. Thank you again for coming over. Thank you again also from previous year speakers. So thank you, Desmond, and everyone else who has been kind enough to return as well for this event. Thank you. I'm going to close the call. And again, we're very grateful for your help and support. Thank you.